Chapter 1. The Distant Stars. Runa had never felt truly seen, at least not in the way her people, the Zyari, saw each other. They were a proud race of beings, known across the galaxies for their immense strength, their unmatched intelligence, and their ability to manipulate the universe with the sheer force of their will. To the Zyari, power wasn't just a trait, it was an identity. It was woven into every action, every interaction, every accomplishment. And in the heart of the Zyari's majestic world, on a planet bathed in the golden glow of two suns, Runa was a ghost. She was someone who didn't quite belong. From the moment she was born, the difference was palpable. While her people shimmered with vibrant energy, capable of moving mountains with a thought or bending the very fabric of space to their will, Runa was weak, so much weaker than them. Her family, prestigious and proud, looked at her with quiet disappointment, their love strained and thin, their patience stretched far too thin. Runa's skin, a pale shade of violet, was a stark contrast to the rich indigo and electric hues that ran through the veins of her people. Her hair, too, lacked the luster that many of her kin had, the silken, metallic sheen that seemed to shimmer with the light of their homeworld. Her hair was a dull brown, nothing special, nothing that would make her stand out, not in a society that celebrated beauty and power above all else. Her voice, too, lacked the smoothness, the strength of command that her race was known for. Instead, it was soft, almost tentative, as if she were unsure of her very existence. Even in her most confident moments, it was as if something inside her was constantly reminding her that she wasn't enough. She had tried, of course. She had spent years honing the small abilities she did possess, but they were no match for what her family expected of her. The telepathy, the psychic manipulation, the gravitational control, it all came so naturally to others, to her siblings, her parents, even her peers. But for Runa, it was like trying to catch the wind with her bare hands, elusive and beyond reach. Her family's disappointment in her had started as a whisper, an unspoken understanding that she would never be as capable as her siblings. Her father, the matriarch of their family, had always been a towering figure in Zyari society, respected for his ability to control the tides of their planet's oceans with nothing but a gesture, for his strength and leadership that inspired loyalty in everyone who followed him. Her mother, too, had once been a beacon of authority, her voice able to sway entire councils with her intellect. But where her parents were mighty and revered, Runa was fragile, a quiet echo of their greatness, barely noticed by the world around her. At first, they tried to teach her, to help her improve her abilities. They sent her to tutors, to scholars, to masters of the old ways of Zyari power. But the results were always the same: failure, frustration, and the same distant look in her parents' eyes as they realized that no amount of training, no amount of effort, could make her into the person they had hoped for. Her siblings were another story altogether. They excelled in everything they did, effortlessly mastering the powers that had eluded her. Her older brother, Vekar, could command the weather with a single thought, raising storms or calming them with nothing more than a flick of his hand. Her younger sister, Liara, was a prodigy, able to manipulate the very fabric of reality with a whisper, weaving illusions so intricate and powerful that they could fool even the most discerning minds. They were perfect, everything Runa was not. Where her family had once been full of encouragement, their words had slowly become laced with something else, something cold, something that Runa could never quite define, but that she could feel with every passing day. She had begun to notice it in the way her mother would glance at her with pity, how her father would speak to her like she wasn't quite worth his time. It wasn't intentional, of course. They didn't mean to make her feel inferior, but their expectations for her were so high that her inability to meet them became a silent shame in their eyes. The turning point came when Runa reached her teenage years. The Zyari culture, with its obsession with strength, had long held the belief that every individual had a purpose, a role to play in the grand design of their society. It was an honor to be born into a powerful family like hers, to inherit a legacy of greatness. But for Runa, the weight of that legacy had been suffocating. She had never felt like she fit into the grand design, and as time went on, the realization settled in her heart. She was never going to live up to the expectations of her family, never going to be the prodigy they had dreamed of. And that was when they made the decision. Her family had given up on her. though they never spoke it aloud. They didn't need to. The moment they stopped trying to teach her, the moment they stopped looking at her with anything resembling hope, she knew. Runa had been abandoned, but not in the way most people would imagine. She had been abandoned with grace, with the cold, quiet elegance of a family who no longer saw her as part of their future. They didn't disown her, they simply stopped acknowledging her. They treated her like she was invisible, like she was a remnant of their past, a part of their family that had never really belonged. They had sent her off to live in the outskirts of their homeworld, a quiet, secluded area where she could do no harm, where her failures wouldn't reflect poorly on the family name. It was a form of exile, but one wrapped in silk and velvet. No one spoke of it aloud, but it was clear to everyone that Runa was no longer considered worthy of her family's legacy. For years, she lived in that silence. Runa, once the daughter of one of the most powerful families in Zyari society, now drifted through her days like a shadow. She spent her time alone, in a small, dilapidated house on the outskirts of the city, a house her family had abandoned her to. Her days were long and empty, filled with the dull ache of longing for something she could never have. She tried to make peace with her circumstances, but it was difficult. Every time she saw a Zyari vessel pass overhead, every time she felt the presence of her family in the distance, it reminded her of her failure, of her inability to meet the impossible expectations that had been placed on her. She had become a ghost, haunting the very world she had once belonged to, always watching but never truly seen. It was on one of these long, lonely nights that her life changed, though she didn't know it yet. As she sat by the window, gazing out at the stars, the lights of distant cities flickering below her, she noticed something strange. A ship, small and insignificant, was approaching her planet. It wasn't a Zyari ship, it was human. Her heart skipped a beat. She had heard stories of humans, of their strange, resilient ways, of how they had spread throughout the galaxy despite their lack of the supernatural powers that so many other species possessed. Humans had become a force to be reckoned with, not through strength, but through determination, ingenuity, and their insatiable drive to survive. The ship landed quietly in the open fields near her home, and before long, a figure emerged. A human, clad in the simple clothing of a traveler, looked up at the stars, clearly unfamiliar with the surroundings but undeterred by the unknown. There was something about his presence, something gentle but steady in the way he held himself. He wasn't imposing, but there was a calm strength in him that Runa hadn't seen in anyone for a long time. She watched from her window, unsure of why she couldn't look away, her heart pounding in her chest. He was, she realized with a start, looking right at her. This begins to set the scene for Runa's transformation and interaction with the human who will give her a second chance. Would you like me to continue the chapter further, or break it into smaller parts? Let me know if you have specific preferences. Runa's breath caught in her throat as she watched the human approach her home. She had seen humans before, of course on the rare occasions when they passed through her planet's trade routes or when their ships docked at the grand spaceports. But never had she seen one so close, not with such purpose, not with such quiet determination in his steps. His presence, though foreign and strange, was somehow calming, as if his very existence defied the harshness of the galaxy and its cold, relentless expectations. She couldn't explain why, but there was something magnetic about him, something that made her feel, for the first time in years, as though she might not be invisible after all. The night air was thick with silence, save for the faint sound of the grass rustling in the wind. The human stood there, scanning the horizon, his gaze eventually drifting toward the small house where Runa was hidden away. She wanted to turn away, to disappear into the shadows where she could remain unseen, but something in her chest urged her to remain. She couldn't pull herself away, not this time. She had always been taught that the Zyari were a race of perfection, that their power and grace were what made them worthy of admiration. Humans, in contrast, were often dismissed as weak and insignificant small creatures with no real power to speak of. But this man, standing under the vast sky, seemed to defy that stereotype. He wasn't a towering figure, nor did he carry the weight of an entire civilization on his shoulders. He was simply human, and yet, in his simple presence, she saw something she hadn't seen in years: kindness. A kind of strength that didn't come from telepathy or control of the elements, but from within a quiet resilience that wasn't based on power, but on the will to survive and do good in the universe. Her curiosity got the better of her. As if guided by instinct, she moved quietly toward the door, her feet barely making a sound against the wooden floor. She couldn't stay hidden forever, not from the one person who had unwittingly shown her a glimmer of hope in her otherwise dark and lonely existence. She opened the door cautiously, letting a sliver of light spill into the otherwise darkened landscape. The human looked up sharply, and for a moment, their eyes locked. He was taken aback by the sight of her, his eyes widening slightly, no doubt surprised by the strange alien before him. Runa froze, unsure of what to do next. Her heart pounded in her chest, her mind racing for words, but she hadn't spoken to anyone in months, let alone a human. What could she possibly say? What would he even think of her? She opened her mouth, but no words came out. The human took a tentative step forward, his voice gentle, calm, almost as if he had been expecting this moment all along. "Are you okay?" he asked, his tone filled with something that was not pity, but genuine concern. Runa blinked, shocked by the simplicity and sincerity of his question. No one had ever asked her that before, not her family, not her people. The Zyari had never been interested in her well-being, only in what she could offer them. Her father's disappointed glances, her mother's cold silence, her siblings' casual avoidance, they had never once considered her feelings. The human, standing there in front of her, was offering her something she hadn't realized she had been starved for: empathy. A human, a stranger, was offering her kindness. I'm fine," Runa managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper, her words faltering as she spoke. She had never felt more vulnerable in her life. She could feel the weight of her family's abandonment, the years of being treated like an afterthought pressing down on her, suffocating her. But this human, he was waiting for her to speak, to share her story if she wanted to. He wasn't pushing her, but he was there, offering something that had been so foreign to her: understanding. He took another step closer, this time lowering his gaze to meet hers. "You don't have to lie to me," he said softly. "You don't have to be alone." Runa's chest tightened. She had spent so long convincing herself that she was meant to be alone, that her family had been right in their dismissal of her. But standing in front of this stranger, this human who had no obligation to her, she felt something stir inside her, a flicker of hope, of possibility. Maybe, just maybe, she wasn't beyond saving. Maybe there was more to her than what her family had believed. Before she could speak again, the human extended his hand, his gesture simple, but filled with unspoken compassion. "I don't know what's happened to you, but I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here because I can see you. I can see that you're more than what you think you are." Her eyes filled with a sudden, sharp wave of emotion, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in so long. Tears stung the corners of her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, ashamed to show weakness. But the human didn't flinch or pull back, he just stood there, his hand still outstretched, waiting. "I'm not a burden," she finally whispered, the words tasting bitter on her tongue. "But everyone else thinks I am." The human's expression softened. He nodded slowly. "Well, I don't think you are." The words hit her like a sudden surge of warmth. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust him, but she had been abandoned by her own family. Could she really trust someone she had just met? Could she allow herself to be vulnerable again after years of being rejected? But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something different: no judgment, no pity, just kindness and the promise of a second chance. Something inside her stirred, and for the first time in years, she dared to hope. Chapter 2: A Second Chance. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions, a mix of uncertainty and discovery. The human, whose name she learned was Alex, returned to her small home every day, bringing food, offering company, and most importantly showing her that she wasn't as invisible as she had once believed. They talked about anything and everything. He never pressed her about her past, never asked why she had been abandoned by her family, but slowly, Runa began to open up. She told him about the Zyari, her race's expectations, her family's harsh treatment of her, and how she had been left behind, discarded like an obsolete machine that no longer served a purpose. Alex listened intently, never interrupting, his eyes filled with empathy as she spoke. He never made her feel like she was burdening him. His patience was infinite, and as they spent more time together, Runa began to feel something she hadn't felt in years, the spark of belonging, of connection. One evening, as the two of them sat beneath the stars, the soft glow of distant galaxies twinkling above them, Alex turned to her, his face serious but gentle. "You know," he said softly, "it's not your fault. What they did to you, it doesn't define who you are. It's just a chapter in your story, not the whole book." Runa blinked, the weight of his words sinking in. For so long, she had allowed herself to be defined by her family's rejection, by their cold indifference. But Alex was showing her that there was more to her, more to her story than she had ever allowed herself to believe. "Maybe," she whispered, a tremor in her voice. "Maybe I've been too afraid to try. Maybe I've convinced myself that I'm not worthy." Alex reached over, gently placing his hand on hers. "You are worthy. You always were. You just needed someone to remind you." In that moment, Runa knew that everything had changed. She wasn't alone anymore. Alex had given her something she had thought lost forever, a second chance. Her heart fluttered with the realization that she was no longer just the burden her family had seen her as. She was someone capable of so much more. And with Alex by her side, she was ready to take the first steps toward reclaiming her life, her worth, and her place in the universe. As the days passed, Runa began to feel a shift within herself, a transformation that was as slow and gentle as the rising sun over the distant horizon. She had never known the comfort of true companionship, but Alex's presence, steady and patient, began to unravel the tightly wound knots of her heart. His kindness had become her anchor, and for the first time in years, she felt like she was not just surviving, but truly living. With each passing day, she learned more about the human world, about Alex's life, his dreams, his struggles. He told her of the harsh realities of his own existence, how he had fought to find a place in a galaxy that often viewed humans as insignificant, as nothing more than an afterthought in the grand scheme of things. But what struck Runa the most was his unwavering belief in the goodness of people, in the idea that everyone deserved a chance to make something of themselves, no matter their past or their mistakes. In return, Runa shared her story with him in more detail, speaking of her family's high expectations, of the burden she had carried for so long. She told him about the isolation she had felt, the relentless pressure to be something she was not, and how, despite everything, she had never been able to fulfill the dreams her family had set for her. For years, she had been nothing more than a disappointment in their eyes, a symbol of failure. But with Alex, she began to realize that she wasn't defined by their rejection, nor by the limitations she had imposed on herself. She could be more. She could start over. Alex never once judged her. He didn't see the broken girl her family had abandoned. He only saw Runa the strong, intelligent, and capable person that she had buried beneath years of self-doubt. His belief in her was a light that illuminated the darkness of her past, and with every word, every gesture, he reminded her that she wasn't alone anymore. She was worthy of love, of a future, and of hope. As the weeks turned into months, Runa felt herself slowly shedding the layers of guilt and shame that had weighed her down for so long. She began to trust in herself again, to believe in her own abilities, even if they were still in their infancy. She started experimenting with her power, small things at first, like moving objects with her mind or manipulating small gusts of wind. And each time, Alex was there, encouraging her, celebrating her progress, no matter how small it seemed. He had faith in her, and that faith became a foundation for her to rebuild her confidence. One evening, as the two of them sat on the porch of her small house, watching the stars stretch across the dark sky, Alex turned to her with a smile. "You're ready, you know," he said softly. "You've come so far already, and I know there's so much more you can do." Runa looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude, and something more, a sense of purpose, of belonging. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything yet," she admitted, her voice tentative. "But with you by my side, I think I can face whatever comes next." Alex's smile widened, his eyes soft with affection. "You're stronger than you think, Runa. You've already proven that." The moment hung in the air between them, charged with unspoken understanding. Runa knew that she had a long journey ahead, that the path to reclaiming her place in the world would not be easy. But for the first time, she felt ready. She wasn't just the girl who had been abandoned by her family. She was someone with the power to change her fate, to rewrite her story. And no matter what challenges lay ahead, she knew she would face them with Alex at her side. Chapter 3. The Call to Action. The quiet peace of Runa's life, however, would not last forever. Though she had begun to rebuild, to reclaim the parts of herself she had lost, the echoes of her past were never far behind. Her family, though they had cast her aside, still held sway over her destiny. The Zyari were not a race that easily forgot those they deemed weak, and Runa's family, particularly her father, had always been a pillar of power in their society. Even though they had abandoned her, they were still capable of bringing chaos into her life with the mere flick of a finger. One day, as Runa was working with Alex to repair an old communication relay that had malfunctioned, a message came through. The words were cold, mechanical, a stark reminder of the family she had tried so hard to distance herself from. The message was from her father in official summons, demanding her presence at the Zyari Council. Her heart sank as she read the message, the weight of her father's words hitting her like a tidal wave. The summons was not just a request, it was a command. It was a reminder that no matter how far she had come, no matter how much she had changed, the Zyari would always see her as a tool to be used, a legacy to be salvaged. Alex noticed the change in her demeanor immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. Runa handed him the message, her hands trembling slightly as she did. "It's from my father. He wants me to come back, wants me to stand before the council." Alex read the message in silence, his brow furrowing as he processed the words. "You don't have to go," he said firmly, his voice resolute. "You've worked so hard to get here. You don't owe them anything. You've already built a life, Runa." Runa closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision before her. She knew Alex was right. She had no obligation to her family, not after everything they had done to her. But the call of the Zyari Council was not something that could be ignored. To refuse would be to risk drawing the ire of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. The consequences of such a refusal were unimaginable. "I don't know if I can avoid it," she said quietly, her voice heavy with uncertainty. "But I can't keep running from them forever. I need to face them on my own terms." Alex placed a hand on her shoulder, his touch grounding her in the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "And when you do, I'll be with you," he said softly. "I'll be by your side, every step of the way." Runa looked up at him, her heart swelling with gratitude and something deeper, something she had never allowed herself to feel until now. She wasn't alone anymore. She had someone who believed in her, someone who would help her navigate the treacherous path ahead. "I don't know what's going to happen when I get there," she admitted. "But I know that no matter what, I'm not the same person I was before." Alex smiled, a quiet pride in his eyes. "That's all that matters. You've already taken back control of your life. And nothing, not even the Zyari, can take that away from you." With a deep breath, Runa stood up, the weight of her decision settling in her chest. She wasn't sure what awaited her at the council, but she knew one thing for certain this time. She was ready to face whatever came next. She had a second chance, a chance to define her own destiny, and nothing would stop her from claiming it. Runa spent the next few days preparing. Though the preparations were not of a practical nature, she had no need to pack, nor did she need to worry about provisions. No, the true preparation was within her, and it was the hardest part of all. How could she face her family again? How could she stand before the Zyari Council, knowing they had cast her aside as if she were nothing more than a mistake, a burden on their legacy? Alex was with her every step of the way. Though he knew she had to face this alone, he didn't let her feel isolated. He helped her maintain her focus, gently reminding her of the strength she had gained over the months they'd spent together. He kept reminding her that she had already proven herself more than worthy of being loved, of being seen as more than just an afterthought, a flaw. It was one of the things that kept Runa grounded. Her doubts, her fears, could have swallowed her whole, but Alex's unwavering belief in her gave her the courage to keep moving forward. When the day finally came to leave, she stood before him in the quiet, dim-lit home she had come to call her sanctuary. "I don't know what will happen next, Alex. But I'm not the girl who was abandoned anymore. I've changed," she said, her voice firm but heavy with emotion. "Even if they don't see it, I know who I am now." Alex gave her a warm, supportive smile, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. "You've already won, Runa. No matter what they say or do, they can't take away what you've found inside yourself." Runa nodded, then turned toward the door. This was it. The moment she had both dreaded and anticipated had arrived. She stepped outside, feeling the weight of her decision settle around her. The sky, which had once seemed so vast and overwhelming, now felt different, as though it was simply a canvas, waiting for her to paint the next chapter of her story. She had lived in the shadows for so long, but now she was ready to step into the light. Chapter 4. The Return. Runa's journey to the Zyari capital was swift, her emotions a storm inside her as she traveled through the cold emptiness of space. She had no idea what awaited her on the other side. Her father, the matriarch of her family, had been the one to call for her return. The Zyari Council, the most powerful governing body in her people's world, would expect nothing less than perfection, and that was something Runa had never been able to offer. But she wasn't the same person who had been abandoned years ago, and that was what terrified her the most. What would they see when she stood before them? The weak, flawed daughter they had cast aside, or the woman she had become, strong in her own right, with a future that didn't need to be defined by their expectations? As her ship neared the towering spires of the Zyari capital, Runa's heart pounded in her chest. The city below was a shining beacon of civilization, an intricate web of glistening buildings and soaring towers. It was everything her family stood for: power, beauty, and strength. It was everything she had never been able to live up to. The ship descended slowly, landing in the designated docking bay of the city's central square. As the door hissed open, she stepped out, taking a deep breath before walking into the heart of the Zyari Empire once more. The streets were bustling with activity, Zyari citizens moving with purpose, their eyes glowing with the quiet strength that Runa had always admired but could never quite match. They were tall, elegant, their movements graceful and fluid. They were the epitome of what Runa had been taught to aspire to, yet she couldn't help but feel like an outsider, a visitor in a world that had never truly been hers. Her father's estate was grand, built into the side of a massive cliff that overlooked the entire city. As she approached the gates, she could feel the weight of her heritage bearing down on her once again. Her father was the leader of the Zyari Council, and his influence reached far beyond the walls of their home. He had always been a figure of power and strength, and she had always been his disappointment. But that had been before Alex, before she had found her own strength. The doors to the estate opened as she approached, and she was escorted in by 2 guards. Her father was waiting in the grand hall, his back to her as he gazed out over the city below. Runa took a moment to compose herself before stepping forward, the sound of her footsteps echoing in the silent room. "Father," she said, her voice steady, though it wavered ever so slightly. Her father turned, his eyes narrowing as they landed on her. For a moment, he said nothing, simply regarding her with the same detached coldness that had always characterized his gaze. The years between them seemed to stretch out like an abyss, the distance between father and daughter greater than she had ever realized. He opened his mouth to speak, and Runa steeled herself, prepared for the harsh words she had come to expect. "Runa," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "You've returned. I see you've done well for yourself." Runa took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her past pressing down on her shoulders. "I'm not the same person I was when I left," she replied quietly. "I've changed, father. I've learned to stand on my own." Her father's expression flickered for a moment, perhaps with surprise, perhaps with something else, but it quickly faded into his usual impassivity. "You are still my daughter, Runa, but you are not fit to lead the Zyari. You never were." For a moment, Runa felt the sting of his words, the sharp reminder of everything she had failed to be in his eyes. But this time, she didn't shrink. She didn't cower beneath his gaze. She stood tall, meeting him with the same steady gaze he had always used to look down at her. "I don't need to lead the Zyari," she said softly. "I'm not here to take your place. I'm here to show you that I am more than what you believed me to be. I found my own path, and I'm not a burden anymore." Her father didn't respond immediately. Instead, he studied her, as if seeing her for the first time. The silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. But then, something unexpected happened. His expression softened just a little. "You've always been more than you gave yourself credit for, Runa," he said, his voice tinged with a rare note of vulnerability. "I see that now. It wasn't much, but for Runa, it was everything. She had spent so long fighting for this moment, fighting to be seen, to be understood. And in that moment, she knew that her journey, her true journey, had only just begun. Her family may have abandoned her once, but now she was the one who had the power to choose her future. And no matter what, she would never let them define who she was again.